Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Tuesday, October the 27th, 2020. I'm going to start with COVID-19. I guess we're in the second wave. There is no second wave, but all of the experts, the scientists, are telling us that there is, and so we have to live with the consequences. My own province of British Columbia has gone less noticeably insane than many other places on Earth, but one gets the impression that our public health officials here are a little jealous of the panic and insanity of other places. This is from CBC. BC has put new restrictions on private gatherings in homes after confirming a record high 817 new cases of COVID-19 over the weekend and 3 more deaths, the largest number of new cases in the province in a 3-day period. The new numbers cover a 3-day reporting period since Friday, with 317 cases recorded between Friday and Saturday, 293 cases between Saturday and Sunday, and 207 cases between Sunday and Monday. The province is seeing the result of increased social gatherings over the Thanksgiving weekend, and the mounting cases, particularly in the Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health regions, are concerning, said Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry. This is a bit of a sobering weekend for us, she said. To get through our COVID-19 storm, it requires all of us to do our part. No exceptions, no workarounds, no trying to get around the very few but important rules that we have in place. The increase in new cases comes as a direct result of social gatherings happening in private homes, Henry said. Her new provincial health order restricts gatherings in private homes to no more than immediate household members and a safe 6 additional people, a number she acknowledged may still be too many for some households, depending on space and number of people already living together. Henry said it has become clear gatherings of fewer than 50 people are not always safe. We need to pay more attention to those settings where we have people coming together for celebrations, Henry said. This is going to be a challenge more for some people than others, but this is something we need to do as a community. The province's restriction of no more than 50 people remains in place, but there are caveats. It requires that a venue have sufficient space to ensure physical distancing between everyone. Henry said enforcement will be stepped up to ensure new public health policies are followed, with a focus on the Fraser Health region, where an increase in new cases has been identified. Orders are a last resort, but it does reflect how seriously we need to take this now, Henry said. So let's look at the numbers here. Science, right? Science is a lot to do with numbers. So we have this panic in British Columbia. Why? Because an average of 1 death a day for 3 days. Yes, 1 death followed by 1 death, followed by 1 death over a period of 3 days. Apparently, this is a crisis that requires more destruction of society. 259 people have died of COVID-19 in British Columbia. 77 are in hospital and 26 in intensive care units. British Columbia has a population of 5.1 million people. This is absolute madness. What does our great leader, Justin Trudeau, have to say about this? He said, well, wait a minute, they changed the headline here. An earlier story had said that Trudeau had said that COVID-19 really sucks. Yeah, that's what, this sucks. It really, really does, he said. Canada's Prime Minister, he loves cosplay, going out and staying in, long walks on the beach at sunset, travel, and stimulating conversation. He hates mean people and injustice. His relationship status, it's complicated. Anyone can go to the bccdc.ca, where you will find BC COVID-19 data. Presumably Dr. Bonnie Henry has been there. And what we are seeing is a great number of new cases, but a paucity of deaths. But apparently this doesn't make any difference at all to the panic. Panic must continue. No exceptions. Peter Brimelow tweets in response to Maxime Bernier, who had written, "Hysterical politicians and media only focus on the number of COVID-19 infections to justify the lockdowns while ignoring the number of deaths. Same manipulation technique they've used for years to push climate alarmism." Brimelow comments, "A leading Canadian politician knows that deaths, not cases, are what matters with COVID-19. US deaths up 0% again in 24 hours. Does any US politician know this? Not asking about the mainstream media." Ethical Skeptic had tweeted, "Capitulation." This is in response to an article from the New York Times, which was headlined, "The Pandemic's Real Death Toll, 300,000 Deaths, and it's not just from the coronavirus." A CDC analysis finds that overall death rates have risen, particularly among young adults and people of color. He writes that TES, that is the Ethical Skeptic followers, knew this months ago. Actual excess death tally is 350,000 because the Centers for Disease Control included 2018 in the baseline, which is a Gaussian outlier, not sound practice, making it too high. Sequestration deaths equal 135,000 or 39% by the end of October. So what would Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, have to say about the way we live now, the dictatorship of scientism? Stacy Rudin has a piece at the American Institute for Economic Research, "Who Deserves Your Trust in the COVID-19 Debate?" Epictetus believed that honorable character and a life of wisdom begin with a clear understanding of one basic principle. Some things are with our control and some things are not. How we are perceived by others, our popularity, is ultimately outside our control. We should focus on character, not reputation, because trying to control or change what we can't only results in torment. The year 2020 has revealed this to be true. Many Americans, especially affluent types, prioritize reputation over character, and it has indeed resulted in torment. In the COVID debate, there is a mainstream popular narrative and a competing unpopular narrative, a fringe. The former exploits the common mediocre desire to be popular. Joining the movement is easy. It results in backpats, validations, and requires no uncomfortable confrontations. This narrative states that it is impossible for humanity to survive the COVID-19 pandemic without a vaccine, lockdowns, and masks, some combination of which you will be required to endure into the indefinite future. The narrative supports blaming others for infecting you with diseases rather than encouraging personal responsibility for immune and general health. Proponents of the competing narrative, on the other hand, must stand up to massive social forces simply to make their arguments, which are not radical. They support a return to classic pandemic management tools, the same ones used by Sweden and other states and countries which did not lock down for COVID-19, which resulted in average mortality for 2020. They do not believe this pandemic warrants a complete overhaul of the economic, social, and educational systems. They believe that every human being should be empowered with truthful information about risk and how to best care for personal health and make his or her own choices. Faced with these competing narratives, we must consider motives and costs. The force of social pressure to conform with the mainstream narrative is large. So we know from the outset that the people willing to argue against it are either insane or extremely driven, courageous, and strong. It is easy to eliminate the possibility that they are crazy, many of them, such as Elon Musk and the scientists who drafted the Great Barrington Declaration, are giants in their field. They risk everything, weathering exhausting personal attacks from all sides in order to battle the crowd. Who are these people? What do they gain by doing what they do? Princeton professor Robert P. George, a specialist in moral and political philosophy and the theory of conscience, uses the example of slavery to demonstrate that every serious moral dilemma reveals two categories of people: the majority, who go along with the popular zeitgeist, no matter how atrocious it is, and the minority, who risk their very existence to fight it. Professor George wrote, "I sometimes ask students what their position on slavery would have been had they been white and living in the South before abolition. Guess what? They all would have been abolitionists. They all would have bravely spoken out against slavery and worked tirelessly against it. Of course, this is nonsense. Only the tiniest fraction of them, or of any of us, would have spoken up against slavery or lifted a finger to free the slaves. Most of them, and us, would have gone along. Many would have supported the slave system and happily benefited from it. So I respond by saying that I will credit their claims if they can show evidence of the following: that in leading their lives today, they have stood up for the rights of unpopular victims of injustice, whose very humanity is denied, and where they have done so knowing, one, that it would make them unpopular with their peers; two, that they would be loathed and ridiculed by powerful, influential individuals and institutions in our society; three, that they would be abandoned by many of their friends; four, that they would be called nasty names; and five, that they would risk being denied valuable professional opportunities as a result of their moral witness. In short, my challenge is to show where they have, at risk to themselves and their futures, stood up for a cause that is unpopular in elite sectors of our culture today." And Rubin draws from that, Epictetus would recognize these people, those willing to pursue unpopular causes, as people of character, mature people who create their own merit by forgetting what other people think of them. Quote, "Never depend on the admiration of others. There is no strength in it. It is a fact of life that other people, even people who love you, will not necessarily agree with your ideas, understand you, or share your enthusiasms. Grow up. Who cares what other people think of you?" Unquote. While this path leads to wisdom and self-respect, Epictetus recognizes that it carries a tremendous social cost, which is why only a minority choose it. You may be ridiculed and even end up with the worst of everything in all parts of your public life, Epictetus wrote, including your career, your social standing, and your legal position in the courts. This happened to the abolitionists for decades, and it is happening to COVID dissenters now. Dr. Scott Atlas was smeared by 100 of his colleagues at Stanford, who then refused to debate the substance of their claims against him. One Google search will reveal dozens of smears against the Great Barrington Declaration and its authors. What do these anti-lockdowners gain by presenting their case to the public? Nothing material, a concept which is difficult for pro-lockdowners to understand. What they gain is security in the knowledge that they fought for truth, justice, and what is right, even to the point of risking everything. This is a privilege. Anti-lockdowners get to stand up for the least powerful in our society, for those who have no voice, for the people who are desperate for their industries to survive, for the small business owners who make just enough to feed their children, for the essential workers who stand in the supermarket checkout day in and day out while their children stay home playing video games in place of school, for the kids in developing countries who walk for miles through fields just for a Wi-Fi signal, for the frightened elderly people who haven't hugged a family member in 8 months, for the hospital patients who will die alone and afraid, for the religious congregations prevented from doing outreach, for the families foregoing holidays, birthdays, and travel, for the socially isolated, for the babies who are growing up without seeing smiles, for the special needs kids deprived of their therapies, for the women and children locked home with abusers, for the new patrons of the food bank, for the formerly proud career men newly sunk to the unemployment line, for those driven to drugs or drink, for those whose rehab was suspended, for those considering suicide, for those whose vaccinations and medical treatments have been delayed or canceled, for those wondering if life will ever again be worth living, for those who feel there is nothing left to rely on now that lives, livelihoods, and educations can be decimated at government win. What do the lockdowners gain? To answer this question, we need only consider who has the acceptance of their program benefits. Tech interests, billionaires, pharmaceutical companies, certain political parties. The 1%, the same people who can easily work from home, who are not harmed by lockdowns, who consider themselves so smart that their decision as to what should be scary must hold for every single person on the planet. No votes are needed because their judgment is so good. Whatever businesses and educational systems and social structures need to die must die because they say so. All they need to do to push this system is gain the cooperation of the media, which can be done with dollars alone. Ask yourself, who deserves your trust? I would argue that anti-lockdowners are today's abolitionists, people willing to take up an unpopular cause at incredible risk. Lockdowners may currently be popular, but they are on the wrong side of history. Well, the wrong side of history, that's a very troublesome notion because, of course, history, as we know, is written by the winners, and we don't yet know who are going to be the winners here. As long as we're citing philosophers, I'd like to cite Plato. And what would he think about the Bonnie Henrys of the world, the Teresa Tams of the world, the Anthony Faucis of the world? Plato said, "There is no difficulty in a man's winning applause when he is contending for fame among the persons whom he is praising." Now, this ludicrous and sinister phrase, "we are all in this together," it makes certain people feel good. It makes a lot of people feel good, as it turns out. It's absolute nonsense, but people do like to be praised. Let's go to the chat. MCT says, "I see the show now comes with a latest information warning." Does it? Is it sufficient to mention COVID or COVID-19 to get an information warning? To quote Mike Stoklasa, I don't quite get the reference. William Hicks, "On Thursday, I mentioned a memorable scene in Herzog's Lessons of Darkness where he shows roughnecks capping a well to a Viennese classical piece. The piece is Notturno by Schubert." Debrea says, "Are they going to build the concentration camps or what?" Well, we've heard talk of this in Ontario and Quebec. Walrus Libertarian says, presumably of Trudeau, "Not the leader we need, but the leader we deserve." David Wright says, "In the meantime, what happened to the flu?" I will get to that shortly. Mont D. Law says, "The People's Party got less than 1,000 votes in 2 ridings in the Toronto by-elections," which is true enough. William Hicks says of Schubert from Wikipedia, "He died of typhoid fever at 31 years old, although historians consider it possible that he may have had the coronavirus." That's good. David Wright says, "Hitler didn't commit suicide. Days earlier, he had tested positive for COVID." Oh, can this be made into a meme? Hey, Americans have a perfect way to express what they want. It's called an election. Yeah, I'll be getting to that shortly, too. Metal Mike says, "Retail and schools remain open in Canadian hotspots, which proves that public health officials are now aiming for herd immunity. They won't admit it." Well, I certainly hope so. But back to the COVID-19 salt mines. William Briggs, a statistician to the stars, writes today, "The panic is picking back up steam led by surges in cases, which are caused by massive numbers of testing. I heard on the news last night a plea to keep away from hospitals so that they're clear for the second wave, which will soon be crashing down all around us. Could it be the Prague media organizations want to frighten people from going to the polls? No lessons have been learned from the first wave of the panic, not one damned one." If If you think it would help, please forward this post to anyone you know who is panicking. Point them to the numbers section. Reader JC writes of a sign in the bathroom of Catholic Church: wash your hands and say your prayers because Jesus and germs are everywhere. Christian religion teaches us that death comes to us all and we will all be judged by God. One might have thought that, say, the Catholic Church would find an easy way to speak of the religious importance of COVID-19. That is to say, you may avoid getting COVID-19, and if you get it, you will probably avoid dying of it, but you're all going to have to die sometime. So be prepared. Briggs writes, I quote myself, I repeat my fear that with the ridiculous and increasing levels of testing, the regular cold and flu season and its associated infections, hospitalizations, and deaths will be used to juice the panic. Be watchful for this. It's happening as predicted. We saw last week the World Health Organization's flu tracking showed the flu all but disappeared for months. Others are noticing it too. Just like with flu, vaccines will not save us from all corona doom deaths. And he repeats a tweet from Yinan Weiss. Let's take a brief journey into the success or lack thereof of masks in preventing the spread of coronavirus. Come with me on a tour of the wonderful world of mask mandates and their results. First up is Austria. It was one of the first to require masks, and it did so about 10 days after its cases began to go down. The downtrend with masks did not change. After wearing masks for 6 months, cases are now 4 times where they were when they mandated masks and climbing. Next to mandate was Germany, everybody's favorite success story until it was not. It mandated masks about halfway down its original recovery. After wearing masks for half a year, their cases are now climbing quickly. Let's visit Germany's historical foe, France. The French waited a little longer to mandate masks. They now have around 1,000 the daily cases than when they mandated masks, despite having one of the highest mask compliance levels in the world. Across the Pyrenees, Spain was not far behind its French neighbor with a mandate. Spain required masks when cases were near zero and has the highest compliance of mask wearing in all of Europe. Now Spain is about 1,500% the level of cases than when it mandated masks. The British really held out on masks for a while. It was a bit late to the European party. Within 3 months of requiring masks, it's now around 1,500% cases higher, despite having one of the highest mask compliance records in Europe. And I could go on, but I think my point has been made. The flu. Yeah, let's talk about the flu. And here is a story from the Daily Mail. In the Southern Hemisphere, where the flu season happens during our summer months, the WHO data suggests it never took off at all. In Australia, just 14 positive flu cases were recorded in April, compared with 367 during the same month in 2019, a 96% drop. By June, usually the peak of its flu season, there were none. In fact, Australia has not reported a positive case to the WHO since July. In Chile, just 12 cases of flu were detected between April and October. There were nearly 7,000 during the same period in 2019. In the UK, our flu season is only just beginning, but since COVID-19 began spreading in March, just 767 cases have been reported to the WHO, compared to nearly 7,000 from March to October last year. This is real, says Dr. David Strain, senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. There is no doubt that we're seeing far fewer incidents of flu. So where has the flu gone? Vox Day comments, COVID-19 is the flu, obviously. Despite whatever differences there might be between a coronavirus and a rhinovirus, COVID-19 is simply playing the role that the annual flu strain, which is different every year, does. It is a little more dangerous than the normal flu virus, though considerably less dangerous than certain historical strains, which is why all the lockdown and mask nonsense is now totally pointless and is merely delaying the natural process of the virus working its way through the population before it finally peters out. It wasn't a bad idea to err on the side of caution when the virulence of the disease was unknown, but now we know, so there is no reason to continue being paranoid about it. No reason except the sunk cost fallacy, which is a very powerful reason. It's asking a lot for people who have made bad decisions which have cost hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of lives, and will cost many more in the future, to admit that they were wrong, because then I suppose they would be expected to resign and perhaps to retire in disgrace. The Daily Mail Online tweeted its summary of the story, which I just quoted from, as COVID killed off the flu, influenza cases nosedived by 98% across the globe, to which my response was, nothing suspicious here, nothing at all. So let's go to Lockdown Skeptics from Toby Young. And again, they're talking about the National Health Service in danger of being overwhelmed. And there is no evidence of this. But I suppose, if the sky is falling, well, it didn't, fall 6 months ago or 3 months ago or last week or yesterday, but I suppose it's theoretically possible that the sky could one day fall, and that we are told that one day the sun is going to stop shining. It would be a bad bet, however, to bet on the sun not shining tomorrow or a month from now or even 100 years from now. C.S. Lewis, the great, Irish, actually, he was an Ulsterman novelist and a theologian. He had something to say on what Thomas has called scientism. Quote, again, the new oligarchy must more and more base its claim to plan us on its claim to knowledge. If we are to be mothered, mother must know best. This means they must increasingly rely on the advice of scientists, till in the end the politicians proper become merely the scientists' puppets. Technocracy is the form to which a planned society must tend. Now, I dread specialists in power because they are specialists speaking outside their special subjects. Let scientists tell us about sciences, but government involves questions about the good for mankind and justice and what things are worth having at what price. And on these, a scientific training gives a person's opinion no added value. Let the doctor tell me I shall die unless I do so and so, but whether life is worth having on those terms is no more a question for them than for any other person. But of course, the politicians across the world have set up the scientists, the technocrats, for a fall. Because if this goes all J.G. Ballard, and I think that there's a serious possibility of riots and insurrection in several places around the globe, probably starting in England first, perhaps Spain second. Well, again, I've used this story before, but it's like the Minister of the Interior in A Clockwork Orange. We followed advice given to us by experts. An inquiry will place the blame where it belongs. We elect politicians to make difficult decisions. That's why we give them this power. But they're saying now, no. We're not going to make the difficult decisions because we are not scientists. Again, lockdown decisions are not scientific decisions. They are political decisions. A correspondent has just written to me, New Zealand concentration camps for refusers. Australia, especially Melbourne, is already in tyrannical lockdown, as is Great Britain. Are such quarantine isolation camps planned for all of Canada and the United States? In New Zealand, you can now be interned in a quarantine isolation camp if you refuse to be tested for COVID-19. Even if you do not have any symptoms, they can now order anyone to be tested for any reason. You can also now be held indefinitely in one of those quarantine isolation camps in New Zealand. As we know, Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's chief medical officer, mused in a documentary, which you can find on YouTube, about establishing concentration camps for a disease scofflaws in Canada. And what's coming up next here? We'll go to Alex Berenson here. Well, some big school districts have already extended online learning into 2021. Many smaller Texas districts are going the other way. They say the gaps between online and in-person students are too large to allow online education to continue. Senator Tom Cotton, had tweeted back in February the 16th, let me debunk the debunkers. Pauline Miller and her experts wrongly jumped straight to the claim that the coronavirus is an engineered bioweapon. That's not what I've said. Berenson comments, that was 8 months ago. The efforts to shout down Senator Cotton were overwhelming. Yet he was right. The issue is not whether the People's Republic of China built SARS-CoV-2 as a weapon. It's whether a lab failure allowed it to leak, possibly during experiments to test and raise its virulence. And in the months since, no one has found a wild virus like SARS-CoV-2. No one has found an animal host. No one has found a market or cave or farm where transmission might have occurred. You think the Chinese haven't looked? Meanwhile, the circumstantial evidence implicating the Wuhan lab has only grown stronger in the last 8 months. Where is the scientific outrage? Where are the demands for a clean investigation? I don't know. Trump has said that he's going to make China pay for Wuhan or the China virus, as he has said. In New York City, we already have hints that Mayor Bill de Blasio is going to cancel Christmas. And of course, our own Prime Minister, Princess Rockstar, suggests the same. According to Canadian press, the pandemic's rising second wave could jeopardize large gatherings with friends and family over Christmas after a reined-in Thanksgiving. It's frustrating knowing that unless we're really, really careful, there may not be the kinds of family gatherings we want to have at Christmas, Trudeau said. He sought to spur hope ahead of a tough winter. We will get through this. Vaccines are on the horizon. Spring and summer will come, and they will be better than this winter. Yeah, that's what they were said. That's what they said about summer, and that's what they said about autumn. And we're going to be in winter soon enough. We're not even in winter yet. It's always darkest before the dawn, supposedly, but COVID-19 is a situation where there may not be a dawn if the scientists have their way, because one can never be too careful, apparently. Oh, yes, more on Christmas. This is from a Breitbart, Thomas Williams. Pope Francis to celebrate Christmas Mass without a congregation. Well, of course. In an October 22nd letter to ambassadors to the Holy See, the Vatican's foreign minister, Archbishop Paul Gallagher, said that the pontiff's Christmas ceremonies would take a private form this year without the presence of the faithful. Pope Francis has drawn ongoing criticism for his reticence to wear a face mask in public, despite urging the faithful to obey all government regulations aimed at curbing the spread of the virus. I believe that if we all, as good citizens, comply with the prescriptions of the authorities, it will help to end this pandemic, he said on October the 14th. Now, apparently, the Catholic Church decided it had no problem with Easter being canceled, and I suppose it won't have any problem with Christmas being canceled as well. Let's have a look at J5 Killer, see what he has to say. One Wally had tweeted, Joe Biden arrives to the deafening roar of adoring supporters at a massive campaign rally in Georgia. Unfortunately, one Wally included a video of this, which is, what are we looking at here? 100, 150 people in these stupid circles. This is not massive. It's not even, what am I seeing here? I'm seeing closer to 75 people. J5 Killer commented, the swelling multitudes overcome with joy mobbed the candidate, bursting through the barriers, lifting him onto their shoulders and parading him around the city like a conquering hero. Not since Sherman marched to the sea has one man so dominated the Peach State. Yes, Trump is holding an awful lot of rallies, even spontaneous ones, such as going to Maine, where he appeared at a village of 3,000 people, and it would appear that everyone in that village showed up. Vote now, vote early. PA had tweeted, can someone explain why 700,000 mail-in ballots aren't returned yet by Democrats? What are you waiting for? Get it together. J5 Killer says, typical Pennsylvania snafu, can't figure out why Democrats aren't returning their ballots. What are they waiting for? Defeat. And now we are going to move on to talking about Joe Biden. And yeah, let's talk about a myth. Reed Wilson. Okay, I think I have two things by him. The secret to Biden's lead, people find him likable. This is Joe Biden's third attempt to be elected president of the United States. Bob Dole, when he was the nominee in 1996, this was his third attempt, which rather suggests that Joe Biden, like Bob Dole, is not particularly likable. Oh no, but we have polls. At a time when most Americans loathe their political leaders, Biden's campaign and his outside allies have spent months building their candidate up as empathetic, competent, and even likable. Empathetic and competent. Yes, those are not two words I don't think very many people would apply to Joe Biden, but nevertheless, that strategy has paid off. Polls show more Americans view Biden favorably than unfavorably. A recent Quinnipiac poll found 49% saw Biden favorably, while 44% viewed him unfavorably. A New York Times survey conducted by Siena College pegged Biden's favorable rating at 53% and his unfavorable number at 43%. Those numbers are in marked contrast to President Trump, whose favorability ratings are underwater. But of course, it's not people who are polled who decide who's going to become the president of the United States. It is voters. And voters do not go to the polls simply because they don't hate someone. Typically, they need a positive reason to do so. And the fiasco of the last few months, where Joe Biden has been hiding in a basement, well, again, it's unheard of. I won't say it's inexplicable. I suppose they know what they're doing, that the more people see Joe Biden, particularly as decrepit as he has become, the less they like him, or more to the point, the less likely they are to vote for him. A story by Frank Salvato at the National File. Democrat presidential candidate Joe Biden has apparently decided the best strategy for defending against the mountain of evidence that points to a deeply corrupt Biden family and a scandal that threatens his 47-year political life is to pretend it doesn't exist. At one of his last in-person campaign appearances before Election Day, Biden was asked by a Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania television reporter about the scandal that erupted after the New York Post published the contents of a laptop belonging to Hunter Biden. The contents of that laptop included evidence that the Biden family, including Joe Biden, is deeply entangled in an influence-for-profit scheme that stretches from Ukraine to China. But as the reporter was about to finish his question, Biden cut him off mid-sentence. "There is no controversy," Biden defensively jabbed. "That's all a lie. It's a flat lie because the president has nothing else to run on. If you noticed, while the American people are talking about what's happening to their families, he has no plan. And at the debate, he has no plan." As the reporter watched in stunned silence, Biden continued to spin. Everything from Wall Street Journal, other major news outlets said what he is saying is simply not true about my son, but it's classic Trump. Yes, I'm not going to get into the details because those are important. I'm just going to say that it is untrue. Now, I wanted to talk about a story by, I believe, the same reporter. They're getting us ready, or they're getting, the world, especially Americans, ready for the idea that it's going to be chaos after Election Day, and it's going to take just forever to get sorted out. Yes, Reed Wilson had tweeted, "This has been bugging me for weeks. Results on election night is a completely modern phenomenon, and then only in blowouts. Election administrators take weeks, up to a month, to make sure they get the count right. Getting it right matters more than getting it first." I responded to him, "Weeks, stop gaslighting us. You know this isn't true. In a handful of modern U.S. presidential elections, the result was not known until the next morning. 2000 was a special case as the Democrats were determined to use lawfare to steal it." So I spent about half an hour on Wikipedia, and I went back to every U.S. presidential election from 1948 onwards. I didn't want to play the trick where you start at a place which is more advantageous to your side of the argument. So I thought the threshold would be the first election after the end of the Second World War. So in 1948, it was Truman versus Dewey. And this was an election, the results of which were known. That is to say, the winner was known in the AM, early in the AM. But there had been little doubt since the polls first started reporting, because Truman had a steady lead. But that's a morning result. 1952, Eisenhower won. This was known early in the evening. 1956, Eisenhower won again. This was known early in the evening. 1960, the result, or the concession from Nixon, did not come until Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon. One of the reasons being that the Democrats stole the election through election fraud in Illinois and Texas. 1964, the elections were known in the evening. I should clarify, by evening, and since I am on the Pacific Coast, I mean by midnight Pacific time. 1968, the elections were not known. The winner was not known until the morning. In 1972, the election results were known early in the evening. In 1976, the results were not known until 3:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is just barely in the morning rather than the evening of the election itself. In 1980, when Reagan won the first time, the election results were known early in the evening. Even more so in 1984, when Reagan was reelected. In 1988, when George H.W. Bush was elected, the results were known in the evening. In 1992, when Bill Clinton was elected for the first time, the results were known in the evening. In 1996, when Bill Clinton beat Bob Dole, the results were known in the evening. In 2000 is the only example since 1948 when we're talking about weeks or a month. And this is because of Democratic lawfare in the state of Florida, where the Gore campaign, led by David Boies and other, I don't know, $5,000 a day lawyers, attempted to steal the election. In 2004, the results were known. That is to say that John Kerry conceded in the morning. But in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected for the first time, the results were known in the evening, election day. 2012, when Barack Obama won. Again, the results, the winner was known in the evening of election day. And in 2016, when Donald Trump was first elected, the results, the winner was known in the evening on election day. Even though Hillary Clinton, I don't know, she had a nervous breakdown, or she was too insensible to concede, and she did not do so until rather late the next day. But I bring this up, not merely to go on about psephology, but to let you all know, if you didn't know it already, that you were going to be hearing a great deal about, nobody knows who won presidential election for the longest time. You've got to get it right. Well, there's a question of legitimacy here. I mentioned this yesterday. There's 500,000 ballots in my province of British Columbia, which they're not even going to start counting for another week. And the longer you go from election day to when we know the winner is, the more suspect the election is. We saw this in the 2018 midterms. It looked like the Republicans, congressional Republicans, were having a pretty good night. Fewer of them lost than were expected to. And then for days and days and days after Election Day, ballots were harvested. And as a result, the Republican Party was almost wiped out in the state of California. Let's talk about Kamala Harris. Is she running for vice president of the United States, or is she running for Instagram influencer? This is a story from RT. Kamala Harris garnered quite a few haters after going sneaker shopping with a pop culture outlet as a campaign promotional event, with viewers seeing the move as unserious and pandering. Harris was probed about her footwear in a video released Monday by lifestyle outlet Complex. "I love my Chucks," the California senator said of her Chuck Taylor sneakers, a fashion choice often lauded in liberal circles on social media. "I think it's a statement about who we really are," she explained. So your sneakers, they say who you really are. I guess that Kamala has locked down the sassy box wine ant demographic. I should just explain for younger viewers, listeners, that Chuck Taylor's sneakers are associated with old school America. They were the sort of sneakers, whether low cut or high cut, tended to be worn by ordinary people. And then starting from the 70s with Adidas and Nike and the like, they were thought to be old hat. But given the enthusiasm for everything retro, about a decade ago, suddenly Chuck Taylors became hip again. I don't know, perhaps for the same reason that Pabst Blue Ribbon became hip about 10 or 15 years ago. That's not a very good comparison because Pabst Blue Ribbon is swill. But it's what rednecks drink. So I'm gonna wear a trucker's cap, and I got my nerd glasses, and I got my beer, and I got my Pabst Blue Ribbon. Isn't that so cool? I'm just wondering if Kamala Harris shrieked with laughter when she said these things, because that is her want. She was blundering around stage the other day, appearing drunk, actually. But again, maybe she thinks that this is the way that young people walk and talk. You can see that this was focus grouped. That Kamala Harris is not really an American. Neither of her parents are American. And of course, she grew up in Montreal, Canada. But why don't I associate myself with an American icon? RT continues, despite a policy-free intro, the 10-minute discussion was overwhelmingly focused on it. Harris spoke about her running mate Joe Biden's plans for small business financial relief programs and potential mandates to prevent the ongoing spread of the novel coronavirus. Oh yes, Kamala Harris. It was a few weeks ago. She said, oh, what's the deal with Joe Biden and ice cream? Well, of course, Kamala Harris is not an American who didn't grow up in America. So, perhaps someone explained to her that Americans like ice cream. However, a fashion-titled video published on a pop culture channel was perhaps not the ideal media space for a vice presidential candidate to occupy during a pandemic and an economic crisis. Many online users thought it was simply a substanceless ad designed to pander to a younger audience on a cultural level. Why didn't they play the greatest rapper alive, Tupac Shakur, while shopping? One commenter jokingly pondered, referring to the time Harris seemed to not know the musician was long dead while trying to prove her hip-hop cred. And of course, yeah, you know what's coming here. This gif applies here better than ever. Steve Buscemi on 30 Rock with the backwards baseball cap and the skateboard and the t-shirt that says rock band with a little lightning flash there. How do you do, fellow kids? Yeah, Kamala Harris, everyone's hip mom. Do people really like hip moms? Don't their children find them cringe, as the kids today are saying? I had a hip mom, and I found it cringe. She used to wear miniskirts with matching jackets and these rings, these big, tall rings, which were plastic, and they look like those drinks where you have one layer of this, which is one color, then another layer and another layer. I forget what they're called. I remember once there were these sexy bad girls in high school who were persecuting me because I refused to buy cigarettes for them. Both my parents smoked. They smoked a lot, and they would send me to buy cigarettes. And I guess the shopkeepers figured that, I was a responsible person and not a smoker. They saw me in the stores buying the cigarettes, and they figured that, well, they sort of made it plain to me that it would be to my advantage to buy them cigarettes, but I refused to do so, probably foolishly. But after this, when they were my sworn enemies, I passed them in the hallway at my high school, and the leader of the sexy bad girls said, "Hey, Kevin, we saw your mom last night at the parent-teachers meeting. She's really cool. How come you're a drip?" And I thought, there may be more embarrassing things to happen to me in my life, but at the present, this is the worst. So, Kamala Harris, and there's a picture of her gesticulating. Again, she looks drunk on stage. It's from Breitbart. Penny Star. Harris called the Senate's confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday illegitimate and vowed that Americans will not forget the Republicans' constitutional responsibility to fill the seat of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said, today Republicans denied the will of the American people by confirming a Supreme Court justice through an illegitimate process, all in their effort to gut the Affordable Care Act and strip health care from millions with pre-existing conditions. We won't forget this. And there was an awful lot of this coping on Twitter and in speeches. Elizabeth Warren tweeted, "This is a dark day, but it's important to remember why Republicans fought so hard to steal the Supreme Court seat. They've realized a truth that shakes them to their core. The American people are not on their side, and we'll keep fighting until we take our democracy back." I responded to Professor Warren thus: "It was all written in the rules. You simply didn't have the votes. Take your punishment like a man." Now, the cope, it gets to be completely out of control. Amy Siskind, and self-described as activist, feminist, author, the Weekly List website, podcast theweeklylist.org, and book Politico 50, president of the New Agenda, former Wall Street executive, she, her, rainbow flag. She tweeted, "Please use Barrett, not ACB. She does not deserve the benefit of RBG's legacy. She is the antithesis of all RBG stood for." Someone called Carolyn Horn responded, "I agree. Ginsburg earned that moniker with her charisma and her badass stand for justice. It's a nickname from the street, from the people. Barrett will never have that love of the American people because she doesn't answer to them or care about them or even truly see them." RBG, it's a nickname from the streets. This is coming from people whose idea of the streets is that the sidewalk you have to negotiate between your SUV and the coffee shop. Yes, that's their idea of the streets, but they're really exercised about this. Let's see, John F. Kennedy was called JFK, and Lyndon Baines Johnson was called LBJ. I don't know, certainly in terms of style and personally, they didn't really have a lot in common. There were some people, and I remember Richard Nixon, full name Richard Milhouse Nixon, he was actually being called RMN by some people. I guess it was thought to be the rule that all presidents had to be called by their initials. But another one of these people, Jane's World, responded to Amy Siskind. "They have no idea what they have unleashed." And there is a GIF of Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot. I think that's how her name is pronounced. And she has some sort of thing on her arm which shoots sparks. Because Wonder Woman is just like an 87-year-old enfeebled Supreme Court justice. And my question, as always, is, do you have any political references that are not cartoons, fantasy, or spandex? Yes, true story. I read this tweet about the nickname from the street, and it is a gloomy day, leaden skies all day, raining, wet, damp, unpleasant. And I read this and I burst out laughing. I laughed out loud. So thank you, Carolyn Horn, for brightening my otherwise gloomy day. This very nasty tone that we're getting in the wake of a loss by the Democrats, which was forecasted by pretty much everybody. But I don't know. They think that the La Résistance was going to rise up to prevent this. Ian Hanchett of Breitbart writes, on Monday's broadcast of the Rachel Maddow Show, Senate Judiciary Committee member Senator Chris Coons of Delaware said that there should be a wide open conversation on rebalancing the courts, including the circuit and district courts, where there are hundreds of judges who shouldn't be allowed to sit peaceably without our re-examining the process, the results, and the consequences. Here's the full verbatim quotation. We've got to have a wide open conversation about how do we rebalance our courts. Yes, the 2 Supreme Court seats that have been stolen through these processes that are just wildly hypocritical, that have been used to jam through partisan nominees. But we've got to look at our federal courts as a whole, Rachel, because we've seen hundreds of conservative judges put on circuit courts and district courts all over this country in the last 4 years, in many cases too young, too unqualified, and too far right to be allowed to sit peaceably without re-examining the process, the results, and the consequences. What's he suggesting here? Mass arrest? Are they all going to be hauled off in chains? Hollywood celebs. Yeah, and they're getting naked. They're getting naked to encourage people to vote for Joe Biden. And there's a picture of Ireland Baldwin, who is the daughter of Alec Baldwin and his first wife, the actress whose name escapes me. She has a very handsome body, I must say, except that it is grossly disfigured by tattoos. Yes, Kim Basinger is her mother. I voted stickers as pasties. Voting is cool, and so are disproportionate boobs, the model posted on Instagram. More humble bragging about her body from a famous person who, as I said, has a very handsome body indeed. Jared Leto. Yep. Sterling K. Brown. Kylie Jenner. These people don't need an excuse to go naked. That's what they do. That's what they do. From David Ang at Breitbart. Hollywood celebs rage and defeat after Barrett confirmation. Revolting, disgraceful, unconscionable. That's what Michael Moore had to say. John Cryer said, a shameful day for every Republican senator. Expand the court, demanded Patton Oswalt. Let's see, Michael Moore, he really went spare. Whack the court, pack it, stack it, frack it, smack it, shellac it, clack it, knick-knack and paddywhack it, crack it open, shack it up, rack it. Yes, it's a racket. Black it, brown it, green it, blue it, expand it, term limit it, fix it now. The Republicans have been campaigning for decades now, through many, many presidential cycles, that if they won the presidential election, that their Republican president would appoint conservative or strict constructionist justices to the Supreme Court. This wasn't this wasn't done in secret. And of course, Mitch McConnell has been campaigning on this for the longest time. What these people are telling us is that they can't lose. Unconscionable is them losing. The Republicans played by the rules, and the Republicans had the vote, and the Democrats didn't. But that's not going to cut it anymore for the Democrats. And it seems they're suggesting that they're going to cut up nasty if, in fact, they do not win 1 week from today. Let's go back to the chat. Charles Nuno says, hello, Charles. I already refer to folks on the left as orcs and goblins for BLM and Antifa. Jay Smith says, how far left is too far left? Would love to know. Well, I don't know when looting is described as reparations. Not as a joke, but for real. Would that be too far left? I'll be talking about Philadelphia in a minute. Chelsea Handler. Yeah, she got naked. To quote one of the characters from David Mamet's film State and Maine, she takes off her shirt to do a voiceover. America could draw her tits from memory. Let's see. William Hicks says the jury is out on Barrett. Everyone forgets that these justices are lawyers who stumbled into a really good gig. Yo Mama says handsome body, it's how you describe a stout and sturdy woman. That's not how I use it. I don't know. Brett Kavanaugh looked like a decent fellow. You know, physiognomy is real. It's not everything, but he didn't look like an evil man. And Amy Coney Barrett, she's this pretty 47-year-old woman with 7 kids, 2 of them adopted from Haiti. She didn't appear to be an extremist. Perhaps beating up on this woman, not the smartest thing to do. Rustin Shackelford says, once the courts become ineffective to push the left's agenda, the left will just circumvent them. Yes, this was being talked about on the left as far back as I think 2 years ago, because they could see the writing on the wall. Debrea says, no Democrat in the White House for 20 years. I strongly believe that. YT says, ha ha ha, I don't really understand people's aversion to tats. Seem to be on a visceral level. I'm not feeling it. Yeah, well, the old Jews were very sound on tattoos. It's disgusting. Tattoos are for criminals. And I suppose if you served in the armed forces, you could have one on your bicep. But beyond that, no. It's an attempt to make one look frightening. It's also an attempt to look like everyone else. Everyone is unique. I mean, unless you're a twin or a triplet, you are different from every other person in the world. But no, you have to have your hair cut in the same way, asymmetrical, multicolored. You have to have piercings and tattoos because for all this talk of authenticity, these people are obviously terrified of individuality. Tats are also they're also symbolic. The problem with that interpretation, though, is if everyone has tats, then they no longer symbolize anything. That they, I suppose, they're useful to men, in the sense that, as I've mentioned before, certain body modifications done by women with the hair and the piercings and the tattoos, aposematic, they call it in nature. It means stay away. It used to be that you would have to know a woman for some time to discover that she was crazy, but they're advertising. Jim Bowden says tattoos are for criminals, sailors, and prostitutes, which is what my late father used to say, and how right he was. Yo Mama, millennials are the illustrated generation. Dan Allison says, many are striving to be in the image of the demon that possesses them. Yes, also slaves, says a tricky woo. Ireland Baldwin, in addition to her handsome body, has beautiful skin, and why she would want to disfigure it in that way. I mean, I feel sorry for this girl. She is seriously messed up. We've known this for years. I won't go into the details. William Hicks says, you want me to be a strict interpretationist? Barrett pauses, thinks for a moment, smiles, and slowly says, sure, no problem. Okay, what else we got here? MCT, the more I hear about women journalists and women politicians, the more I see the need for Stepford wives. William Hicks, RBG had cred. That's right. about the SUV and the Starbucks. Okay. Oh, these hipsters. The streets are often dangerous, you know, often dangerous. When people talk of, coming from the streets, this is indicating they have some experience with danger, not that, come on, who came up with this RBG tag? Was that focus grouped as well? Metatron says most of these Mongoloids had never heard of RBG before this. Well, I remember long ago Earl Warren was a famous Supreme Court justice because he was so hated. But no, most Americans don't spend a lot of time thinking about Supreme Court justices. I mean, several of them even today are anonymous. Chad Chatson, our valiant moderator, says, I blame Gavin McInnes for all of this. The tats. Okay. Oh, Charles Nunnell says, I had no idea what Chuck Taylors were. LOL, I wear dirty Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sneakers, so I'm super retro, if not retarded, in my dress wear. Chogokin 666 favored by the Ramones. Yeah, the Ramones had an interesting dialectic there. The tension between the black motorcycle jackets, which were considered frightening at the time. Tom Petty, in an interview decades ago, said that when his band first came out, the Heartbreakers, people were calling them punk. We're not punk. Yeah, but you got black leather jackets. Oh, a black leather jacket makes you punk. But you see this tension, this dialectic in the Ramones between the torn jeans and the motorcycle jackets. But with the chucks on their feet and the very sort of patriotic image with their logo, one of the most successful logos in history, being based on the Great Seal of the United States of America. Your mama says 2018 was stolen, simple as. Yes, it was. Okay, what are we going to talk about next? Let's talk about the 25th Amendment before we get to that. Oh, COPE. Again, this seriously made me laugh out loud. The Lincoln Project, which is headquarters for Never Trumpers, or a lot of them, put out a video 22 hours ago called Good Night, America. And I was a little confused by this because isn't there a position that Biden is going to run away with the election? And this video, which is professionally shot, which is a minute long, it shows a child's bedroom in the gloaming, child's asleep. And mom comes into the room and she has some news for little Billy that Trump's won. I thought, you're going to wake up your kid, your 8-year-old or 9-year-old kid who presumably can't wait till the next morning to find out the results of the election. Trump's won. And the kid says, amazingly, but I thought he could only be elected twice. What? They haven't even lost the 2020 election yet. And they're already terrified of losing the 2024 election where, I don't know, the Constitution of the United States is going to be amended, which is rather difficult and typically takes a long time. Or Trump is just going to say, I have the Supreme Court now. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to be president forever. And I was thinking 8 more years. 8 more years. Nate Silver, and we'll see what's left of his reputation after November the 3rd. He tweeted, if the polls aren't tightening since the debate, and with 62 million people having voted, we're sort of getting to the point where the only way Trump can win is with a major polling error bigger than in 2016, or if the election is stolen somehow. Max Vitriol responded, no poll guy. People win elections by votes, not polls. How do we know that 62 million people have voted already? I think that's a number just pulled out of thin air. If they keep this up, by November the 3rd, they're going to be telling us that more than 100% of the electorate has already voted. And let's see, the response to this from Molly Hemingway of The Federalist was of interest. Nate Silver is telling Democrats to not accept election results if Trump wins. But as we know, it's going to take weeks, maybe a month, maybe even longer than that. From Frank Salvato again at the National File, talking to a friendly crowd on a New York Times Connected podcast, failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton lashed out at Trump supporters, conservatives and Republicans, calling them cowards and spineless enablers. Joe Biden was calling Trump supporters chumps a few days ago. That didn't get as much attention as Hillary Clinton calling Trump supporters a basket of deplorables 4 years ago. This is just dreadful. I mean, not in the sense of the insult, but politicians, they've long thought that, how could anyone not vote for me? These people who, are not voting for me are jerks. And of course, some of them are self-aware enough to understand that a lot of people that are voting for them are jerks too, but that's not the point. Each vote is equal. And so you do not ever insult the electorate. Ever. It's not done. No. Politicians traditionally have sucked up to voters, or even, amazingly enough, sucked up to what you might call, Joe Lunch Pail. They don't do that anymore, not on the Democrat side. But you don't insult the voters. You don't do it. It's a no-win situation. Here's some more cope. And this is from Mark Joseph Stern, who's a staff writer at Slate, where he writes Courts on the Law. Holy shit, Brett Kavanaugh just endorsed Rehnquist's concurrence in Bush versus Gore, which was too extreme for Kennedy or O'Connor. This is a red alert. I can't believe he put it in a footnote. This is terrifying. And Robert Cruikshank, who is the campaign director at Demand Progress, Do What Is Right, comments, Kavanaugh is laying the groundwork for a 6-3 right-wing Scottish majority to overrule state courts and intervene in the election on Trump's behalf. Well, Barrett, or the glorious ACB, is now on the court. She was not on the court when there was a 4-4 decision about Pennsylvania's decision that they were going to accept mail-in ballots for up to 3 days after Election Day, even those without postmarks. We have plenty of evidence of Democratic election fraud, and we're going to get plenty more, which of course is why people should vote with paper ballots on Election Day. That's why that should happen. But no, they're laying the groundwork here for talking about some sort of coup d'etat, constitutional takeover by the Supreme Court. This is after decades of lauding the Supreme Court to the skies. They gave us Roe v. Wade and all the other wonderful decisions that helped to wreck America. From a Charlie Spearing at Breitbart, President Trump warned Michigan voters Tuesday that former Vice President Joe Biden would step down if elected so that Senator Kamala Harris would become president. If he gets elected 3 weeks into his presidency, they'll say, Kamala, are you ready? Let's go, Trump said, referring to the radical left handlers that would control a Biden presidency. The president referred to legislation introduced by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Representative Jamie Raskin that would create a commission to evaluate the president for removal from office using the authority of the 25th Amendment. That's why they talk about the 25th Amendment, right? Trump asked. The president spoke of Biden as a gateway for the left to get President Harris, who is considered much more liberal. 3 weeks, Trump predicted. 3 weeks and Joe's shot. Let's go, Kamala. Are you ready? Most liberal person in the Senate. She makes Bernie Sanders look like a serious conservative. I'm not so sure about this because we have seen enough of Dr. Jill Biden to know that she very much covets the role of First Lady. Now, you say the First Lady doesn't have any power, but you will remember when Michelle Obama was First Lady of the United States, she became the dictator of America's school lunch. I haven't seen that in the Constitution, but there it was. And of course, Woodrow Wilson's wife, Edith, I believe was her name, was effectively president for about 18 months because Woodrow Wilson in his second term had a very serious stroke which incapacitated him. This was kept from the American people, and Edith Wilson ran the show. It's happened before. I can't imagine that Dr. Jill would really be best pleased at being First Lady for only 3 weeks. Because essentially, Kamala Harris became president, Dr. Jill would pretty much be ordered to disappear because she would remind Americans of a very strange situation whereby the Democratic Party deliberately ran a candidate that they knew was not fit for office. What if they gave a riot and the MSM didn't care? There's a story from The Guardian. Philadelphia protesters take to streets after police killing of black man. Walter Wallace, 27, shot several times by officers. Police in riot gear disperse demonstrators. Is this one of those peaceful protests? Way down. What are we looking at? Paragraph 30 here. Police arrested about 20 people relating to looting, the Inquirer reported, and detained 10 people overnight. The district attorney, Larry Krasner, said the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office takes its obligation to try to be fair and to see even-handed justice seriously. The DAO Special Investigations Unit responded to today's fatal shooting of a civilian by police shortly after it occurred and has been on the scene with other DAO personnel since the time investigating. So that would appear to be the big issue. Another really commonplace story as opposed to rioting and widespread looting and a typical, smashing up of a city. But New York Times didn't report on this. CNN did not report on this. Other major news organizations did not report on this. And why? Well, because it doesn't make the Biden campaign look very good, does it? This is from the Daily Mail. Moment Philly cop is run over by speeding truck. As hundreds of BLM protesters injure at least 30 officers after police shoot dead knife-wielding black man. I used to be an editor, and if I'd been in charge of The Guardian, I would have said, no, what you're going to lead with is what's something close to an insurrection in Philadelphia, one of America's largest cities. 30 police officers injured, cruisers set on fire. I would say that's a bigger story. but perhaps that's just me. And let's talk about this story a little, again, from the Mail. And we have a picture of a young man with a scraggly beard and dreadlocks. Police officials have revealed that 2 officers fired 7 shots each at Walter Wallace Jr., a 27-year-old black man who was killed while approaching them with a knife. At a press conference on Tuesday, Philadelphia Police Chief Daniel Outlaw, oh, come on, Daniel Outlaw, police chief. You know, I enjoy a joke as much as the next man, but this goes too far. She revealed new details in the case, which left the city rocked by protests after Wallace's death on Monday afternoon. Again, yeah, rocked with protests. How about riots? I mean, riot is a pretty neutral word, isn't it? Outlaw said that the 2 cops, who have not been publicly identified, fired a total of 14 shots, or 7 each, at around 4 p.m. Monday, when officers were called out to reports of a domestic incident at Locust and South 61st Streets in Cobb Creek's West Philadelphia. Yeah, how long do you think it's going to be that American police are going to be responding to domestic incidents in, shall we say, the inner cities? There are many questions that demand answers. Residents have my assurance that those questions will be fully addressed by the investigation, Outlaw said. 30 officers were injured in the violence, of whom 29 have been treated and released. Most of the injuries were caused by projectiles thrown by demonstrators. The female sergeant, who remains hospitalized, suffered a broken leg after an individual in a pickup truck intentionally ran her over. Oh, here we go. Yesterday, people in the city came together to peacefully protest. The criminal activity that occurred was not a part of these protests and did not serve any legitimate purpose. And the Mail, of course, as always, gives us many, many pictures. Looters run out of a cell phone store following protests over the police shooting death of Walter Wallace in Philadelphia. The police chief said that they did not serve any legitimate purpose. How about having a cell phone when you didn't have one, or having a much better cell phone than you previously had? E to Z Beauty was looted. A business owner stands outside of her looted beauty supply store following protests over the police shooting in Philadelphia. Yes, 91 arrests for looting and rioting, including 76 for burglary, 11 assaults on police, and 8 police vehicles damaged. Police vehicles, large numbers of the time being damaged or destroyed, it's just become commonplace on America's streets now. Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney said the video of the shooting presented difficult questions about the actions of the officers, and that he understood the struggles of the Black community, who he said suffered from systemic racism. Bystander footage shows the cops shouting at Wallace to put the knife down and him walking with his arm out before the 2 cops offload a hail of bullets into the body. I've spoken before about the 20-foot rule or the 21-foot rule, where if someone with a weapon, an edged weapon even, gets within 21 feet of you, is considered to be a deadly threat. And if this person does not desist, he gets shot, often shot to death. The alternative is, of course, that the police might as well simply pack up and leave these cities. You see a tremendous gulf in the coverage between the mainstream media and, I suppose you could say, alternative outlets, and these alternative outlets are almost exclusively on the right. Cassandra Fairbanks wrote in the Gateway Pundit, "Chaos in Philly, shops and police vehicle looted during Black Lives Matter riot, fires officer down, police, quote, lost control of 52nd Street, unquote." She described this as a massive, violent riot. And the assertion that the police had lost 52nd Street came from a Philadelphia police scanner. But it's all justifiable black rage is justifiable because of systemic racism. All this talk about systemic racism, white supremacy, and the like is emboldening death and destruction. There's no way around it. Breitbart had a similar headline: anti-cop rioters injure 30 Philadelphia police officers, one remains hospitalized. Steve Saylor had an amusing headline. Here we go again. Undocumented shoppers in Philadelphia. It will be interesting to see if the media goes all in pushing this police shooting in Philadelphia like they did in Minneapolis, Atlanta, and Kenosha, or whether ever since Kenosha, the word has been out to keep BLM rioting on the QT until after the election. Luke Rudkowski had tweeted, and now there's massive looting in Philadelphia, like that will help anything. Dos XX Machina tweeted, retail reckoning. Steve Saylor comments, obviously a nightmare scenario for Democrats is, at the last moment, a blue city in the key swing state of Pennsylvania being sacked over a routine black crazy man with a knife shooting at 11 p.m. EDT in Philadelphia. That was yesterday. It's a pleasant 61 degrees Fahrenheit and not much chance of rain before Tuesday night when Antifa normally arrives. And even through Wednesday, the weather is likely to be not bad. Then it's going to pour rain on Thursday. Joe, that would be Biden, it probably feels like it's his duty to America to go on national TV tomorrow and announce his one-point plan for ending police killings. Quote, this is a real quote, when an unarmed person comes at him with a knife or something, a knife is a weapon, shoot him in the leg instead of the heart. Even though Biden has at least twice in 2020 made his shoot him in the leg suggestion, as recently as 2010, he beat me to my joke about the idea coming from unrealistic cowboy shows. From the New York Post in 2010, Palladino, whose association represents 5,100 investigators, said he showed the bill last week to Vice President Joe Biden, who scoffed and suggested it be dubbed the John Wayne bill because it demands sharp shooting skills of the kind only seen in movies. Saylor concludes, is the old Biden still in there somewhere under this silly new Biden? Fidelios Automata commented, in a more sane world, Black would thank police for taking this lunatic out of their midst. How many fellow Blacks would have been killed, or has he already killed? One might think that, but that is not how they think. This has been demonstrated over and over again, and there appears to be no end of it. This is a classic in-group, out-group difference. That within the in-group, Blacks in his neighborhood might consider him to be a dreadful person, a physical threat to them, perhaps a deadly threat to them, and who they would be pleased enough to see him limited, as Trayvon Martin would say. But when this is done by a member of the out-group, it becomes intolerable. Evidence of systemic racism and justifies rapine and looting, as well as attacks on police officers. Again, this is not a new story. This has been repeated hundreds or thousands of times in the last few decades. Ian Miles Chong had tweeted, Black Lives Matter's rioters have torched another police vehicle in Philadelphia. Raheem Kassam commented, the rioting in Pennsylvania as independents and moderates pick a side in this fledgling civil war. Perhaps that's one of the reasons for the push for early voting is because of the level of uncertainty involved with Black Lives Matter. That, okay, they've made their point, now will they just please stop? But there's no stopping them. And we've seen that public support for Black Lives Matter has fallen something like 30% since its height. there are now as many people, last poll I saw, who do not support Black Lives Matter as opposed to those who do. Oh, the Washington Post has an explainer for us. Police stopped or arrested George Floyd at least 19 times in his adult life, a familiar experience for Black men in America. Yeah, the Washington Post seems to lack self-awareness here. How many people are stopped or arrested by the police 19 times in adult life? We're not counting juvie offenses here as well. Let's look at this WAPO story. Okay. From the day George Floyd moved to Texas as a child to the day he was killed in Minneapolis, the police were omnipresent in his life. They were there when Floyd and his siblings played basketball at the Cooney Homes housing project, driving their patrol cars through the makeshift courts. They were there when he walked home from school, interrogating him about the contents of his backpack. They were there when he went on a late-night snack runs to the store, stopping his car and throwing him to the ground. They were there surrounding his mother's home as his family prepared for their grandfather's funeral. They were at the bus stop on the corner and on his mother's front porch, and they were there in Minneapolis, 1,200 miles from where Floyd first said, "Yes, officer," to a patrolman when he took his last breath in handcuffs. They're not going to get into the whole resisting arrest thing or him screaming at the top of his lungs, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," many minutes before a policeman put his knee to his neck, or at least the top of his back. The frequency of Floyd's contact with police during his 46 years of life is an anomaly for most Americans, except for other Black men. Again, does the Washington Post think that this story is making the argument that it thinks it is making? Well, the majority of public interactions with police begin and end safely in the United States, according to 2015 survey data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. For Black Americans, those encounters are more likely to happen multiple times in a year, more likely to be initiated by police, and more likely to involve the use of force. Here's a hint. Police very much do not like it when people resist arrest. The constant presence of police meant minor violations, such as trespassing, led to jail time. Were these minor violations following serious convictions? Drug addiction and mental health problems that Floyd suspected he suffered from resulted not in treatment or diversion programs, but in felony convictions and a lifetime of indigence. Okay. So we have the minor violations. How about that? Let's see. Over time, Floyd's convictions escalated to theft and ultimately armed robbery of a woman who was pistol whipped by a group of men while at home with her children. George Floyd stuck a pistol into her pregnant belly and demanded money and drugs, or else he would kill her. Sounds like an outstanding citizen, is he not? Even when asserting innocence, though, Floyd and his neighbors learned to take plea deals to avoid a court system they concluded would not give them a fair shot. Floyd was stopped by police or charged at least 19 times in his adult life, according to records, friends, and family. In a handful of encounters, he was let go. Other times, the charges were serious and shaped the trajectory of his life. Meanwhile, officers in the police department that funneled Floyd into the system had been given probation for homicide and civil rights violations. The Houston Police Department remained mired in accusations of corruption and racism in the 1990s as it leaned on policing tactics that are now considered unreliable and prejudicial. What this boils down to is that the Washington Post and the establishment is telling us that Black people in America don't have agency. They're mistreated by the police. They're falsely accused by the police. They are over-prosecuted by the police, whereas all the evidence is in exactly the other direction. What these stories serve to do for any thinking person is to make them terrified of Black people. Nobody is going to look out for you, Floyd's siblings recall their mother, Larcenia Floyd Jones, saying as she admonished them about how to survive an interaction with police. The rules were speak the king's English. Are those the words she used? Try to comply. Don't give white folks an opportunity to think you did something wrong. And perhaps most critically, respect the police. Yeah. Is George Floyd really going to become an American hero? This didn't really work with Trayvon Martin, and it didn't really work with Michael Brown. George Floyd was almost an old man. He was certainly a middle-aged man when he died. And why did he die? Because he attempted to pass a counterfeit $20 bill, and then he resisted arrest twice. That's why he died. You don't see very much crime amongst men who are 45 years of age or older, for the reason that there's a substantial drop in testosterone levels. Also, one might think that a 46-year-old man might just think that the game's not worth the candle. You know, passing a $20 counterfeit bill, I mean, is just a really stupid way to get oneself arrested, or ultimately, in Floyd's case, to end up dying. But I guess that the alleged advice given by George Floyd's mother was certainly not observed by him. But I'll just wrap this up by saying that if the Washington Post believes that its coverage of the George Floyd case is going to somehow bring about racial comity in the United States, they have gone about this exactly the wrong way. Here's another shooting. This is reported by NBC News. A police officer in Waukegan, Illinois, has been fired after fatally shooting a Black teen and wounding a young Black woman who were inside a car earlier this week. The officer who shot at the vehicle Tuesday night, killing the passenger, Marcellus Stinnett, and wounding 19 and wounding the driver, Tafara Williams, 20, committed multiple policy and procedure violations in the incident and has been terminated from the force, said Police Chief Wayne Wallace in Waukegan, 42 miles north of Chicago. The shooting occurred just before midnight after one officer was investigating an occupied vehicle and the car fled, police said in a news release Wednesday. Moments later, a second officer spotted the vehicle in a nearby area. As the second officer got out of his vehicle and approached, the car began to move in reverse, and the officer fired in fear of his safety, according to a Wednesday news release. The officer who shot the couple was Hispanic, and the first officer who investigated the vehicle was white, according to the police. I think that if you polled Black people in the United States, particularly Black men in the United States, and you asked them whether a police officer was justified in shooting at the driver of a car who was attempting to run them over by reversing into them, I think that a pretty substantial majority would say yes. But again, this is another one of these in-group, out-group dichotomies. That solidarity is demanded. Oh, and look who's shown up on the scene. Attorney Ben Crump, who has taken on the cases George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, said he will be representing Williams alongside co-counsel. Ben Crump, now America's best remunerated ambulance chasers. We're coming up to an election, of course. We're 7 days away, and it seems that big tech is determined to have one narrative allowed only. Alan Bakari writes in Breitbart, Google, the world's most powerful technology company, is actively interfering in the coming election by burying links to Breitbart News in its search results. In July, Breitbart News published data showing that Breitbart's Google search visibility is down 99% compared to the same period in 2016. Real Clear Politics later published data corroborating this and showing that the same silent expulsion from Google search results has happened to a variety of other conservative news websites as well. It appears that Breitbart news links are being hidden on Google searches even when users search for the exact string of words in an original Breitbart headline. When links to Breitbart stories do appear, it is often below obscure websites that plagiarize Breitbart's content. Search ranking is critical for web traffic from Google. The search analytics industry has found that the top 3 search results on Google drive over 70% of clicks. In a new video, Breitbart News Editor-in-Chief Alex Marlow reveals in additional detail the depth of Google's suppression of Breitbart's reporting. Breitbart News is, he said, according to Amazon-owned Alexa.com, one of the top 5 news publishers in the United States. Yet if you search verbatim Breitbart headlines in Google, you won't necessarily get any Breitbart results at all. Well, we can see what's happening with big tech here. 1 week from the election, all or nothing at all. Perhaps they've come to the conclusion that they are going to be hammered, perhaps broken up, perhaps even fined extensively or criminally prosecuted. So they've decided, might as well be hanged for a sheep instead of a goat. And they're going all in on a Biden win, perhaps to the extent that people who note results on election day and suggest that Trump has won the election will be tossed off their platforms or suspended, perhaps permanently. There is a tremendous backlash in France. I suppose you could call this the straw that broke the camel's back. A school teacher was beheaded by a young jihadi last week, and President Emmanuel Macron has decided, kick people out. This is from Agence France Presse. France's largest employers' federation on Monday urged companies to resist the blackmail over a product boycott by Arab countries as a backlash widens over Paris's hardened stance against radical Islam. Macron has vowed to take the fight to Islamic radicals after the October 16th beheading of a history teacher who had shown cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to pupils in a class discussion on free speech. But his comments triggered protests in Muslim-majority countries at the weekend, with people burning pictures of Macron in Syria and setting fire to French flags in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Boycotts of French goods are underway in supermarkets in Qatar and Kuwait, with further calls to spurn French products in Jordan and other states. How about this blackmail working both ways? That these Arab countries or Muslim countries, they reject French goods, and France decides to reject Muslim people. How about that? That would seem to be a fair trade to me. Yes, and of course, France has another weapon. The ruling class, or the kleptocrats in many of these Muslim countries, they're quite fond of Paris because, it is Paris, the city of light, also for the shopping. And they could simply say no more visas for Muslim kleptocrats. I'm sure the wives would be most aggrieved. Let's go back to the chat. Jules Roy says the French could hardly reject Arab goods because there aren't any other than oil. No, I meant the goods in terms of their export of people. Donald Robertson says must go after social media censorship source, which is ADL, or you won't solve the problem. Don't use Google. Well, I use DuckDuckGo myself, as well as the Brave browser, and I recommend both of those to you. My Trail of Disgrace says, also, as I understand the sequence of event, the store gave him the opportunity to give back the cigarettes. This would be in the George Floyd case, and other items he was purchasing, and he refused. Yo Mama says, what I see around the world would drive me insane if I did not know that no matter what happens, God will have the last word. That's a quotation. Okay, St. Paulsius? St. Floyd of fentanyl. Yes. Floyd was dying and the police on the scene were trying to save him. Daniel Abel says Manchester bomber succeeded in his mission because security guard was afraid of being accused of being a racist. Okay. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about grooming. Grooming of children. This is from the Cartoon Network 7 hours ago. The crystal gems say be anti-racist. You have to acknowledge racism to act against it. Don't be silent. Use your voice and privilege to help. Stay tuned for more anti-racism PSAs from the Crystal Gems and visit Crystal Gems Speak Up to learn more. The Crystal Gems is part of Steven Universe. And this is grooming. Now, I don't know, this is a very sort of, this is a sort of show which I'd imagine would appeal exclusively to girls and not boys. And one of the ways you can tell is the extensive use of gooey purple. If you see these women who call themselves gamers, they typically play these games, very simple games, which show a lot of gooey purple. And whoever this creature is, gooey purple. But let's look at the text here. Be anti-racist. Okay, the Crystal Gems say this. Hey, when we're older, let's get married. This is a black boy who appears to be, I would guess, somewhere between 8 and 10 years old, and a white boy of a similar age, because that is the sort of thing that 8 or 10-year-old boys say. Ha! But you can't get married, says some other boy. Why not? Black people can't marry white people. Those laws were thrown out a long time ago. Hey now, says this monstrous figure who is purple, ethnically black, I would guess. It's Garnet from the Crystal Gems. Kids, don't be racist. Okay. Cut, says the director. Okay, people, we need to get more coverage. We'll start again in 5. This seems kind of meta to me. This is the cheesiest job I've ever done, says the blonde white boy fiddling with his phone. Stuff like that doesn't actually happen in real life. What? Whoa, where? Are you kidding? Says the black kid. It totally does. Just because this has never happened to you, says Garnet, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Oh, wow, says the blonde kid. Seriously, I didn't know, because that's just how susceptible boys of that age are. That some woman tells them something, so it must be true. Yeah, everyone messes up sometimes, says the black kid, because in situations like this, the black kid is always right and the white kid is always wrong. But you got to realize it hurts to deal with racism, says the black kid. And when people act like it's not real, who is acting as if it is not real? Since the death of George Floyd, that and COVID-19 have been the only 2 things discussed in the United States of America. It makes it feel even worse. You have to acknowledge racism to work against it, says the purple woman. You're right, says the white kid. You kids better work on this before the wedding. Well, that's just a script. We're just actors. We only just met today. And she has 3 eyes and she winks. This is grooming. This is gay grooming. Steven Universe was created by a woman called Rebecca Sugar. She is the first woman, again with the first, to independently create a series for the Cartoon Network. Until 2013, Sugar was a writer and storyboard artist on the animated television series Adventure Time. Her work on the 2 series has earned her 6 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. Sugar is a bisexual, non-binary woman, which has encouraged her to stress the importance of alphabet people representation in art, especially in children's entertainment. She looks rather like you would imagine that she does. That she is apparently committed to bending children, to grooming them. Let's see, on Cameron Esposito's podcast Query, Cameron Esposito is another lesbian. What did Carmen Esposito, this is a desperately unfunny comedian, by the way. Sugar said, I want to champion LGBTQIA, all of it content in G-rated family entertainment. I want to do that forever. She explained how Steven Universe has helped her come to terms with her own identity as bisexual and non-binary. She believes that early and positive exposure to the alphabet people community can help queer-identifying children avoid experiencing shame in their own identity, since we're supposed to believe that 8 and 10-year-old boys can be queer identifying. Well, you know, cut the cable, as they say. They had 2 by-elections in Canada, and a woman called Marcy Yen was one of the winners, Toronto. And she is, or she was, I guess, the co-host of a show on CTV for women called The Social, which is a kind of a ripoff of The View. It's absolutely disgusting. This woman has been favored in the industry since she was a child. But of course, she is oppressed. She's a black woman. She's oppressed by racism. She's been found guilty of driving while black. And she made up this story about being harassed by the Toronto police. This was 2 years ago. The Toronto police had video records of this. And they said that she is lying. Her response to this, exhaustive evidence that she made up the story, she said, the point is not whether I did or didn't do anything. It's how I felt in my driveway. It was his tone. It scared me. As a black woman, she said that is her frame of reference with police, and she doesn't expect everyone to understand. I do feel that being black has something to do with it. She ran through a stop sign, and it was at night. And of course, the cops didn't know what her color was. But as Ashri Pradkar of the Toronto Star has assured us, it doesn't matter that the cops didn't know she was black. It's all about the results. Now, I found out recently that you might recall a few months ago, Jessica Mulrooney, a stylist and influencer, had her career destroyed by a black woman because apparently Jessica Mulrooney was not sufficiently obeisant to Black Lives Matter. This woman is called Sasha Exeter, and she now serves the cause of social justice by being a thought and shilling products on Instagram. This incident, Jessica Mulrooney supposedly being Megan Mertz's BFF, this incident is kind of Canada's future in microcosm. One would have thought that Jessica being a Mulrooney, the very powerful Mulroney clan in Canada, and a Jew and a shitlib would give her some protection against the hysteria of Black Lives Matter, but not a bit of it. And, okay, I've been asked to talk about this. Arm yourselves and prepare. Canada massing tens of thousands of troops in Prince Rupert and Vancouver, Canada. Invade USA. This is from the Hal Turner radio show. I've been sent this or references to it many times. This story supposedly features video of PRC soldiers. I don't know, what, about 100 of them marching, doing training exercises in Salt Spring Island, which is not far from Victoria. It's one of the Gulf Islands. It used to be hippies who lived there, and the property is so valuable now that I guess they're no longer hippies, or they're rich hippies. Supposedly they're also in Prince Rupert, which is a long way from Vancouver, what, like 800 miles or something like that. Also, troops in Stanley Park. Stanley Park is one of the world's largest parks. It is between where Vancouver ends and West Vancouver. Canadians say they cannot get into Stanley Park because it is taken over by the China's People's Liberation Army. Anyone trying to enter the park is stopped by Vancouver police and refused entry unless they are PLA troops. I don't know. Seems kind of dubious to me. This story claims that there's some sort of treaty, the Foreign Investment Protection Act, a bilateral treaty ratified with China by the Trudeau government in 2019. Chinese security forces can be stationed on Canadian soil to protect vital Chinese investments without the knowledge or consent of local authorities. This is from the Canadian Independent Press Review from January 15th of this year. I cannot verify any of this. People have asked me. I thought I'd mention it. Let's say I was talking about alternative sources. This is an alternative source that I'm not all that familiar with. I really can't comment. Again, I'm dubious, but I have spoken previously that it's obvious to me that a large part of various Canadian governments, Canadian business, academia, etc., has been suborned by the PRC. If I learn any more about this, then I'll bring it back to you. It's very dark outside, so I put an additional light here, but you see it has led to rather unfortunate, look like a burn victim. Yesterday I looked puce. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here. MCT says, once people stop believing in God, the problem is not that they will believe in nothing, rather than the problem that they will believe in anything. As Chesterton famously said, KMG, great show, blessings all. Well, same to you. Thank you. So tomorrow is Wednesday. Thursday, I will be back on the air Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. On Theater Thursday, it will be, 2 days before Halloween. And so I've picked an appropriate movie, which is Robert Wise's The Haunting from 1963 in black and white. Great use of distortion from lenses and outstanding sound design. Very, very frightening movie. And on the book club on Friday, again, this is Halloween related, a book about funeral parlors for people and for animals. It's by Evelyn Waugh, and it is called The Loved One, and it is famously based on Forest Lawn in Los Angeles. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to give a donation to this live stream, very much appreciated at this time of personal insecurity and uncertainty. My PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_grace@hotmail.com. calm. If you're Canadian, you can send me money directly through via Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with my traditional benediction. In these times of social isolation and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.